For people who might not necessarily be checking the news, what are the main details on the Russian invasion into Ukraine at the moment?
Well, the first thing which we need to bear in mind is that Russia claimed all along it wasn't going to invade, but that was clearly just utterly ridiculous. They've got around 190,000 troops. Effectively, they haven't quite surrounded the country, but on three sides, Russian forces are poised. And it's a very, very difficult situation for the Ukrainian forces because of that attack, which is coming on all three sides.
I know this is a complicated question, but could you sum up why this is happening?
Well, yeah, that is a very complicated question. So Putin has a particular ideology, and he's actually published this in a book called Project Russia, which has been completely ignored in the West, other than in sort of limited security circles. Essentially, what Putin wants is to restore the Soviet Union, but under the flag of Greater Russia. So Putin is in some ways a little bit hard to assess in terms of his outlook, his sort of mental frame of mind. But what's clear is he's essentially a mafia boss. That's how he runs Russia. He's very clever. His behavior in Syria was, I think, clever. So he engaged in a very limited conflict and got a maximum return out of his involvement. He kept his military base at Latakia. He saved the Assad regime from going under in the face of the rebels, and he ended up being presented with a gift by Trump, who then pulled the American forces away from protecting the Kurds. So what he really wants is the Ukraine back and to integrate it into Greater Russia. In terms of the actual military preparations, the diplomatic maneuvering, he's been very clever. But if you like, the fanaticism of his goals is what's really worrying. And this morning, he essentially made a threat of nuclear war towards the West if anyone tries to interfere with what he's doing. The big problem, of course, is he only interested in Ukraine, or does he want the Baltic states back? Does he want to invade Poland? So the manner in which he delivered that nuclear threat, he didn't name nuclear weapons, but he did say that horrendous consequences would follow, and I don't think he's bluffing.
Touching on, you said obviously Poland could be at risk. Is there any other countries that might be at risk of being invaded, do you
Well, I
think?
think the Baltic states are all in danger of being invaded. Parts of Romania are in danger, eastern parts of Poland. The big question is how much damage will the Ukrainian forces inflict on the Russian army? Again, we're not quite sure what sort of campaign he wants to conduct. So if you're dealing with 190,000 troops, to get all the logistics in place, to get them moving, that's not something where you can snap your fingers and it all happens as if it's a Hollywood film. So there's two ways he could go about this. One could be a fast campaign to try and cut through the Ukrainian forces, surround the big cities, take Kiev, try and do it as quickly as possible. If he tries to do that, there'll be a huge loss of life, huge amounts of damage to property. On the other hand, he could try a slow grinding campaign, because the benefits of that for him would be that he would be able to test Western resolve. As fuel prices go up, the economic impacts of this will start to become noticeable, possibly even in a few weeks. And he may prefer to go for a slow grinding campaign to try and destroy as many Ukrainian forces as he possibly can. Again, we just don't know that at the moment, but he certainly has the capabilities to occupy the whole country.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you just mentioned there about the fuel prices. So, for people in this country, how is it going to affect, people in England?
Well, I think it is going to have a pretty serious effect. Again, it depends on how long the conflict lasts, but I think the path Putin has set out on is it's not going to be the case if he occupies Ukraine and we go back to normal. That this is going to be a very, very serious conflict, stretching possibly over months, maybe even years. So I think we are going to be faced with some serious economic challenges.
Did you want to comment on kind of what you think the UK and the US are doing? Do you think they need to do more?
Well, they certainly do need to do more. I think Britain has been very loud on rhetoric. Certainly Boris Johnson recently in terms of sanctions, but he hasn't really gone for the jugular in terms of economic measures, cleaning up the City of London, because of course there has been, let's say, some speculation that the Conservative Party has benefited from cozying up to Russian money. So I think that will be a moment of truth for Boris Johnson. Will he actually go full throttle on economic sanctions? Because obviously it will have an effect on the UK. I think the US has been afraid of the conflict escalating into a nuclear conflict, which is why they've conceivably made the mistake of saying they won't set foot on Ukrainian territory. I think that was possibly an error. And it will be read by Putin as a sign of weakness. Most of the armies in Europe, apart from the American army, are not in a position to conduct serious military operations in Ukraine, or even necessarily to confront the Russian army in the Baltic states or other parts of Eastern Europe. Although I think there they have considerably a better chance because they will be defending NATO territory. I mean, it's certainly worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis, is how I would assess this. I think it's going to get really bad.